Okay, now we start the lecture. If you cannot hear anything, or if you have some technical problems, then you can just leave it in the comments. I'll check it out if I have time. Okay, seems like it's working. So now I go on with the lectures. First is a short reminder for our final exam. Here we are on 28th of May. And I just posted the instruction for the final exam on our New E3 website a few days ago. And here's a short reminder for you. The deadline is June the 8th. So it's on Tuesday, the 8th of June. And the time is 17:30 in the afternoon. So please just upload your report to our New E3 website before the deadline. And our final exam is a take-home exam. You have three choices. You can read a journal article, or you can watch video on the internet, or you can watch the movies. And please just apply your knowledge in physics and you write a review essay for your topic. And here are the three choices. And every choices have its own instructions. So just pick one of the three and just pick your favorite one and then finish the assignments. 这边我用中文特别讲一下，就是我们的期末考有3个选择，你3个选一个就好了，选一个你最有兴趣，选你最喜欢的。好，所以3个选一个，然后3个选择的任务内容不太一样，所以请大家要仔细阅读我们的说明书，然后按照说明书上面的规则去写你的报告。So this is choice number 1. You can do a analysis on a very famous experiment. Right, this is an experiment. Please read the original article and write your review. This is the discovery of positron, the electrons with positive charges, and that was an accident to discover the positron, but the scientists and they just built up a very interesting experimental instruments, and then they do the analysis. So please just read the paper and write the review. And this is the contents of the review essay. So please just write every topic, answer these 6 questions in your report, and then I leave the rest to you. Yeah. Okay, and then this is choice number 2. What I talk about when I talk about quantum mechanics. I find this video quite interesting, so please just watch this video. And this is the original talk done by the professor Philip Ball, and here is another supporting messages about some conflicting arguments. So you can watch these 2 videos, and then in this talk he just listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 interesting topics in quantum mechanics, and then he tried to explain the physical meaning in it. So you can just watch this video and then just try to understand it. And here are the translations. So here are the interesting topics in quantum mechanics. This is the wave-particle duality, superposition of states, and this is the uncertainty principle, entanglement of states, and then the Copenhagen interpretation, and the multiple universe. All of them are the interesting topics in quantum mechanics, and people talk about it a lot. I think that's because the philosophical view somehow just touches the emotions of the people, so people just take it as a misery, just take it as a myth, or just take it as a interesting story like fairy tales. So just like Alice in the Wonderland. So this is why people keep talk about these topics a lot, but somehow it get a little bit distorted by humans imaginations. And in this video, the scientist, he tried to clear these myths out. So when you're doing this assignment, please just compose a big table like this in your report. And before you watch the video, just please answer these questions. Just try to explain it or try to write your own interpretation about these topics before you watch the video. And then you start to watch the video. After you watch the video, then maybe you can do some corrections on your previous interpretation. You can ask questions, or if there's any alignment from the talk, and you can just write it down. So in this report, please do it this way. Right. Okay. And then finally, this is the current wall. We already watched it in our lecture, and I'm sure it just stimulates a lot of discussion and stimulates a lot of afterthoughts. So if you are very interested in technology, if you are very interested in how to use physics to do it in a engineering area, and you can choose this topic. And in this review essay, please just answer the four questions here. So this is, please just explain what is DC or AC electric power transmission, what is DC and AC electronic motors. So you have to draw some schematic diagrams, and you should explain the physical principles, and you should summarize the advantages and disadvantages. Just do it like you are an engineer. So just do the plans and just try to explain what's the good about it and what's the bad about it. And then the topic about the danger of usage of electronic power. So why is electric shock deadly? So you should do a little bit of analysis on the human body and give instructions on how to prevent electric shock. And finally, it's your own thoughts. So if you have any new ideas about how to build power plant, how to do power transmissions, or how to build motors, and you can write your own ideas. Or if you have any wishes or any hopes about new energy, clean energy, how to do it sustainably, so you can just write your own thoughts. Okay, so this is about the movie. 3 choices and just pick your favorite one. And this is how we do the gradings and the forms, and please read it by yourself, and this is not very difficult, so you can just understand it. Okay, and here are the rules, and please just careful and don't do the bad things. Okay, right. Then this is the final exam, and then we move on to the lectures. 好，那我们刚刚那个期末报告的解说差不多就这样子，那么就请大家准时交报告。那么我们再来，我们开始继续上课。Light. We stopped somewhere here. So, okay, we just explained what is diffraction and what is interference, and what is, if you have a lot of slits, and what is grating. And grating, you can build your gratings in 2 structures. You can do it as a let the light just pass through your gratings. So that is I think that is the transmitting gratings. And here's another grating. We have the reflectional grating. So 光栅有2种，一种是穿透式的光栅，另外一种是反射式的光栅。And in natural environment, on natural creatures, sometimes the feathers, the skin, they have specific structures like this. So they have a periodic bumps, and if they have special molecules or special cells on the skin, and somehow it reflects light. And it depends on the period of the fine structures and depends on the shape. For example, here's the plateau, and this is the bottom. and it depends on the difference. So it depends on the position here and here, and then we take the difference, and the difference here, it changes the length of your optical path, and you can count how many wavelengths is equal to your optical path, and then you can try to set up the condition for constructive interference and destructive interference, and then you can estimate, so what is the light that can be diffracted from or can be reflected and interfered by your reflective structure, and it just create different colors. It can be blue, can be green, can be red. It depends on your wavelength. So this is the physical principle behind the reflective diffraction grating. Feathers, skins, on creatures, or you can artificially produce it by yourself too. Okay. And then here's the original double slit experiment, the video we just watched it. Here's a schematic diagram of the double slit interference, and then you can try to derive the conditions by yourself. So I just leave it, it's not very difficult. And then let's watch another video. So this is about the discovery of the double twist helix structure, and in this video the scientists, they are just demonstrating it with a little spring, and we just let the laser light pass through the little spring, and we just take a look at the diffraction pattern from it, and then you can understand how we discovered the structure of DNA. So now I'm just starting to play the video, and then you can play it on your own computer too.
Today we're going to try and do some laser diffraction, hopefully with a view ultimately to creating the famous cross-shaped diffraction pattern from the helix that Watson and Crick observed when they were doing their X-ray diffraction of DNA. First mistake of the film, it wasn't of course Crick and Watson who did the X-ray diffraction work on DNA, it was
Rosalind Franklin.
So first I need to go and get the laser, obviously. I thought I had one in here, but turns out I don't. No idea when this might have last been used. Ow. So there's definitely something going on there. We're going to pull the wire into the beam. Okay, so this looks a bit more convincingly like we've got something interesting happening. Pretty definitely a diffraction pattern going on there. We've got the dark, some nice dark fringes and light fringes, a bit of a mess in the middle, but spreading all the way over here is definitely something going on. So what's happening is that the laser beam is effectively being cut into two by the wire. The wire is narrower than the beam, so the beam is passing around both sides. You can see all the nice little, the nice pattern of the waves add up and you get a bright. So anyway, they get to the screen, and because they both travel not the same amount of not the same distance. Anyway. Ow. Ooh. Don't know what you just did, but it was good, yeah. Okay, so don't mind this little light exclusion apparatus we just had to set up here. Can't really block out the light in the prep room at the moment, so we're having to improvise. But you can see so much more structure now, obviously because of the slightly crazy assortment of wires that we set up, but you've got diffraction going off all over the place, and if you really look into the structure of the pattern, you can see there's really fine structure throughout the two-dimensional field. But you can imagine that if we went through the whole process backwards, you could work out from this pattern where all those wires are, because if you move any one of those wires, then the diffraction pattern is going to change. So you could, if you could do the math, then you could work out exactly where all those wires are from this pattern. Imagine then doing that not with laser light but with X-rays, and instead not with wires but with atoms, and that is the basis of X-ray crystallography. Another day, another diffraction target. I'm going to remove the glass as carefully as I can. Oh, that will probably do. So I think we've got a diffraction pattern there. It's a very sort of flat cross with the axes of the cross very close together. But I think that's sort of what you'd expect from a coil like this, because it's a very tight coil. If you remember the diffraction pattern we got from the vertical wires, was spread out into this horizontal pattern. Basically, we've got that happening from the coil from two different but not quite perfectly aligned sets of vertical wires. So we've got these sort of line on one side, on the near side of the coil, sort of all lined up together, and then on the far side of the coil we've got the same thing but shifted very slightly as the coil sort of winds itself around. So I think this is what I would have expected to happen. And if we, using my surgical tweezers, if we just sort of tease the filament out a bit, hopefully as we extend the coil and we accentuate the difference between the sort of front and back of the coil, we should see the cross open out a bit. Kind of doing that. Probably only so far I can pull this before it breaks, but yeah, that's quite nice. So we've got this really lovely diffraction pattern just from our light bulb filament over there, and this is very characteristic of the diffraction you get from a helix or a coil or something like that, and it's what Rosalind Franklin saw when she was doing her X-ray diffraction of DNA, and it really influenced Crick and Watson in determining the structure and finding this famous double helix that is DNA. And we've produced something pretty similar here with a light bulb and a laser pen, and I think it's pretty good. I'm quite pleased with it.
Okay, I think this is a very good demonstration. Fine, interesting. Okay, and yep, the story. Okay, this is Rosalind Franklin, and then she did the experiment, and then she just discovered the interesting diffraction pattern from the DNAs, and I think Crick and Watson, and they just saw the data and they do the derivation, and finally discovered the double helix structure of the DNAs. And this is the original data. They just set up two models. I guess here are two types of DNAs, and then they just try to set up the models. They just try to first just do the hypothesis about the structure of the DNA, and here is kind of DNA which has a zigzag structure like this, and the other one is the rod-like structure is flat and it's just twisting around the same plan. Okay, so this looks very, very complicated somehow, but there are two possibilities, and they are giving two different diffraction patterns. So this kind of diffraction pattern, the other kind of diffraction pattern, and if you do some mathematics, I'm sure it's in it's something about a Fourier transform, and you can do the Fourier transform of it, and then you can just try to predict what's the diffraction pattern, and then you can compare it to the experimental one. Okay, so this is the discovery of DNA, and this is actually the discovery of DNA is a very unique case. You have such a strange structure, and I'm sure the experiment is very difficult. The question is, how do you control the layout of your molecules? And the molecules can be tilted. The molecules can be standing at different angles, and you have to try to tune it until your laser light is passing through it from the right angle, right? So the experiment is very, very difficult. But this is generally the physical principle behind it. So we have the X-ray sources, the X-ray beam, and then you have to regulate the shape of the beam a little bit, and you just let the beam go through the crystal, and then just after passing through the crystal, the laser beam is going to generate some diffraction patterns, and then you can look at the patterns and try to reconstruct the structure of your crystal. So usually the crystal structure, it has a periodic pattern, and there are a lot of families of the crystals. And when the light is going through the crystals, it can be transmittive or it can be reflective. So this is the cases with the reflective diffraction, which is called the Bragg diffraction. The light is bumping into the atoms and get reflected, and you can imagine that the atoms are arranged in layers, and the layers are stacking on each other. So the light reflected by the atoms on the first layer is going this way, and the other light bump into the second layer of the atoms are reflecting this way. And here it has a very special angle. This is the angle that you can control. So you can just try to calculate the optical path difference of these two rays, and then you can set up the conditions for constructive interference, and then you can have the D. D is the distance between the two layers of the atom. So this is principally how you do the structure reconstruction. The D is actually the lattice constant, right? And that is a very simple structure. This is the cubic centered crystal, right? Okay, cubic center, body centered crystals. And this is a diffraction pattern from silicon. So when you have complicated crystal structures, and it's generating different kind of patterns. And on the right hand side we have the hexagonal crystals, and you can see the pattern from the hexagonal crystals. And if you work on it a lot, then you just recognize the pattern, and then you can just know the structure of your crystal by one look. 好，然后那这个 X-ray diffraction 这个是大家以后，我相信大家以后一定会常常遇到。只要任何你做的工作是跟晶体有关系的，像半导体它是一种晶体嘛，然后或者是一些特殊的透明的晶体晶体类在半导体业或是在我们现在的科技里面实在是太多了。那么不同的材料、不同的元素，它的晶体结构是会不一样的。然后大家有兴趣的话，你可以就是 Wikipedia 上面就有，它会告诉你说，所谓的晶体它会分类成好几个不同的家族，就比方说体新立方、面新立方，然后它会有什么正方形晶体的家族、长方形、斜方晶系、六角晶系等等等等。那么呢，我们就是在一维上面，我们是用 Bragg diffraction 去做推导，你可以把它拓展到2维跟3维，然后呢，你的变化就很多了嘛。但基本的 principle 是一样的。那么你如果是做这些晶体分析，你很熟悉的话，其实你都会有手册。就比方说某一种晶系，从某一个特定的角度，你把雷射光打进去的时候，你会看到什么图形？那你可以看着那个手册，你光看 diffraction 的图形，你就可以判断你的晶体是哪一种。然后你也可以去判断说我的晶格的尺寸，然后长宽高是多少，等等等等。好，我相信大家以后应该会常常用到 X-ray diffraction. Good. And then we go on with another important pattern. This is thin film interference. And we don't learn it a lot usually we don't talk about it a lot in a lecture, so we leave it just like a misery. But this is very important, so I would like to spend some time on it. This is bubble, and you can see here are beautiful colors from the bubble, and that is from in thin film interference. And this is a thin layer of oil on water, so it's creating some colorful patterns, and they have this sort of metallic like reflected colors from it. And then here's another picture. You can see that we have a soap film, and then we just hold it on a circular ring, but we just let it stand like this. And then if you look from the top to the bottom, and please just pay attention to the colors, you can see that we have black and white from the beginning. It's just grayscales. And then let's just focus on the pink. You can see that here is one period of colors, just like a rainbow. Another rainbow, it goes on and on and on. So here the colors are very saturated, so you see vivid colors, and you can clearly see we have blue, we have cyan, yellow, magenta, blue, and green. But after several periods of color changes, you can see the colors are just getting mellowed. You can see the colors is not that vivid anymore, it's getting softened, and you can just feel like those colors are getting mixed together until you have a color like which is having a hazy texture. So you can just try to remember this feeling when you are seeing those colors in your mind, and you can just try to remember the feelings of counting the periods of the color changes. That really helps you to do the following analysis. 然后这张图片给大家看一下，就是一张肥皂泡泡，肥皂的膜，然后呢，它是在一个塑胶框框里面嘛。然后请大家先仔细观察一下这张肥皂泡泡的膜，它的颜色，从上面到下面。它的颜色是一开始是完全的灰阶，就是从黑色然后到白色，然后再来呢，它开始进入一种它的颜色会非常的鲜明，非常的鲜艳，你可以很清楚的讲出来说，哦，这是蓝色，这是天蓝色，黄色，桃红色，就是它是非常的清楚的。然后你可以观察说它的颜色的分布其实它是有周期性的，就是你们一直都会看到，比方说蓝绿色系变成桃红色系，再切换回蓝绿色系、桃红色系，然后它会一直不停的周期反复，有没有从上面到下面？但是当你的周期变得越来越多之后，然后呢，你的颜色你就会很明显感觉到那些颜色有混搭在一起的感觉，就是被混色，所以它就不会那么的鲜艳，然后它会开始有一种粉彩，然后那种雾的质感会跑出来。所以呢，大家可以花一点时间，就是或者是你等一下你就去厕所，你就弄个肥皂泡泡，然后你就自己观察一下，你可以把这种鲜艳感还有混搭感你可以把它记在心里面，或是想办法就是把它变成一种看颜色的习惯。因为你看到这个颜色的话，你马上可以判断我的 color interference 是在第几个 order， 然后你就可以马上判断说你的 film 的厚度是在哪一个数量级。对，所以这个生活常识我觉得是很好用的。So you can just try to get used to the saturation of the colors, because if you have senses of the saturation, and then you can just directly say what is the order of the color interference, and then you can just try to estimate the order of magnitude of the thickness of the film. Okay, so this is the soap film. And before we start to build a model for the thin film interference, and this is the very, very important point, change of the phases due to reflection. So just a reminder for you, when we work on the strings, the waves on the strings, and we really care about the rigidness of your carrier, if you remember. We really the rigidness of the boundary. So we care if the wave is going from a soft media into a hard media, or in another way around, the wave is going from a hard media into a soft media. So we care about the hard or soft of your boundary. And here are the two cases. So if your wave is coming from a soft medium, so which is associated to a little refractive index, and here's the other medium. We have it. This is hard, which is associated to a higher refractive index, and the wave is getting reflected by the second media. So in this kind of cases, the wave should experience a 180 degree of phase change. So if you look at the phases of your waves before the collision and after the collision, you should see a 180 degrees of phase shift due to the boundary here. So just pay attention to it. And if you are experiencing another kind of cases, this is a hard media and this is a soft media, and here's the point for the reflection, but this is soft media, so we have more freedom to move the molecules, and this is the cases. So it's just like a support but with a free end, and your wave going here, and then the end is sliding up and down. So in this case, the reflected wave doesn't have any phase change. So when you are analyzing the reflection from any kinds of material, and when you are constructing the interference conditions, then please pay attention about it. 那这件事情还蛮重要的，就是大家可以注意一下。假设说你的光是因为你有两种不同的介电值，然后贴在一起，然后两种不同的介电值，它的折射系数就不一样。然后在那个折射系数不一样的地方的接面，你的光如果是在那边反射的话，你要注意一下那个相位的变化。假设说你的光是从一个比较软的介质，就是折射率比较小的介质，然后呢就撞到一个折射率比较大的介质的话，被反射的光它的相位要转180度。好，就是它就跟我们的声波就撞到一个很硬的墙壁，然后它的相位会反转，会翻180度一样。那假设说你的光是从一个折射率大的介质，然后撞到一个折射率小的介质，然后呢它在接面上面，因为你的那个折射率小的介质啊，它比较容易被你的波扰动。那以那种状况底下的话，就是它可以适应你的波的扰动，那就会变成说你反射回来的波它就不会有任何相位的变化。那么我们在推导建设性干涉跟破坏性干涉的条件的时候，这个地方是要很注意，不然有的时候你就会推错。好 ，and here this is the cases for a thin film interference. The plot looks very complicated, so I just try to guide you through it. We have a thin film, and this is air. So we can say the refractive index in the film is larger than the refractive index in the air. The thickness of the thin film is T, and this is our incoming light. So the light is coming this way and getting into our thin film. It gets a little bit refracted by the refractive index right here, and it can get out of it. So this is ray number 3. But just on the surface between the air and the film, here is the first reflection. And we are going from a soft media into a hard media. So here the light ray number 1, it has a 180 degrees phase shift. And then this is the ray which penetrate our film and get reflected by the second interface. But in this case, from a hard media to a soft media, we don't have any phase change, so it goes back. And this is a hard to soft transition, so there is no phase shift at all. So ray number 2, we don't have any phase shift on the entire path, and the optical path difference between ray number 1 and ray number 2 is 2 times of t. We just do an approximation. We just think that our ray is going into the film vertically. But of course, you can calculate the exact number. That really helps you. Okay, so this is if you are observing the light this way, and here are the optical path difference, and you have to mind the phase shift. And if you are observing the color here at the back of your film, and then you can construct other interference conditions, but you just try to apply the same concept right here. Okay, and then here are the equations for the conditions. We have constructive interference, we have destructive interference, and which is related to the wavelength. Okay, so you can just go on, you can just do the other derivations. You can estimate what are the colors that will be enhanced and what are the colors that will be diminished, and then you can just try to derive, so what is the exact color that you see. Right, okay. And here this is 100, this is a half of the wavelength, just because of the 180 degrees of phase shift. Good. Okay, then here is the derivation done by simulation. Okay, so some scientists they just take the white light as a background color, and they just try to estimate what is the color that you see from a film. And you can see that if your color is very saturated, usually the thickness of your film is in the scale of hundreds of nanometers, just roughly about the same scale as of the visible light, right? And when your film is when the thickness of your film is longer than the wavelength, in the scale like several thousands of nanometers, and you can see the color is getting softened. And if the thickness of the film is like thousands and hundreds or even more, so this is 1 millimeters, and you can see that the color is like a soft mint, soft pink, and yeah, that's the color that we see a lot from our samples in our lab. Right. So when you have a film, when you have a thin layer of silicon, if you have a thin layer of diamond or some other kind of crystals, and then the color of mint and the color of pink, that's the color that we usually see. So you can say that the thickness is something like millimeters. Okay, good. Right. 这边我用中文稍微讲一下，大家可以看哦，就是按照我们刚才推导出来的建设性干涉跟破坏性干涉它的条件嘛，然后我们就假设说我们穿过薄膜的光就是白光，然后呢，那我们到底会看到什么样的颜色呢？好，然后大家可以看到，假设说你的薄膜的厚度是在几百 nanometer， 也就是说跟可见光的波长是差不多的状况的时候，你会看到的颜色就是非常鲜明的颜色，就是你会看到这边的颜色它非常的清晰，非常的鲜明，它就像个彩虹的颜色，很纯呐，就是那个颜色是纯色系的，甚至会有点荧光的感觉。那假设说你的薄膜的波长是几奈米， 几十奈米这种程度的话，你基本上不会看到颜色，你会看到的就会是光完全没有穿透，或者是就是白光。所以你看颜色，其实你大概就可以估计一下你的薄膜的厚度是在多少个数量级。那假设说是在500到1000，就是差不多是比1mm公里，就是差不多比1公里小的那个范围的时候，你看到的颜色基本上就会是各种不同程度的薄荷绿，各种不同程度的粉红色。对，这个蛮常见的。通常比方说你拿到一片 silicon wafer， 或是你拿到一片玻璃，你拿到一片实验室里面长好的晶体，它就会自带薄荷绿或是自带粉红色。这个是我们常看到颜色。那假设说你的薄膜厚度差不多是在几公厘那种程度的时候，你看到的颜色基本上都会是透明的。它是透明，但是它会有一点绿绿的，或是有一点粉红的。差不多就是这种感觉。所以就是你以后做实验的时候啊，如果你看到你的薄膜有颜色的话，你先不要惊恐。那个基本上通常是因为薄膜干涉，然后从那个颜色你就可以判断你的薄膜厚度是多少。好 Okay, so now we come back to the soap film, and then we can just look at the colors, and we can tell a lot of stories, isn't it? So you can see from the top, the thickness of your soap film is just a few nanometers. And on the bottom of the soap film, then it's a few micrometers. Just, 我刚刚是不是讲错 ？nanometers 以前不对耶，这是1 micron 耶，这不是1公里耶，这是1微米。对不起，我讲错了，1 micron。这是1.5 micron， 对不起，我刚刚就觉得那怎么这么厚？好 ，OK。但是呢，你就可以从你光看你的薄膜的外观，然后你就可以判断你的薄膜的厚度。所以呢，你会看到，我们挂在那里的肥皂薄膜，它会有这么丰富的颜色，然后有饱和度的变化。那是因为你的肥皂的薄膜的厚度从上面到下面是不一样的。然后下面的薄膜会那么厚，是因为那个重力把你的肥皂水都吸到下面去了。你看薄膜相对上都比较厚。And you can see this color change when you are growing a crystal film too. So when you are pushing gases of elements into your vacuum chamber, and then if you just try to induce the crystallization, and usually you see a very vivid color, very saturated color from the beginning, because the thickness of your film is very small. And then you can see the color change from here to here to here to here until it looks like a transparent crystal. So it's a good knowledge for you to see if your crystal growing is under your control. 那么以后如果大家做的事情是长晶体的话，你也会很常看到这件事情。就比方说你在一个真空腔里面把你数亿的元素的气体灌进去，然后你就开始调气压或是调温度、调压力什么的，让它开始结晶嘛。那它开始结晶之后，你一开始看到那个薄膜的颜色一定是非常鲜艳的。那随着你的晶体的厚度变得越来越厚，然后它的颜色就会变成薄荷色系列、粉红色系列，然后逐渐最后变成透明的。那你看到这个颜色变化，你就放心了，因为那表示你的晶体是有长出来的。所以你可以用这个小小的方法，你就可以去做很多判断。好，薄膜干涉 Newton ring, and this is common when you are working on lenses or when you are working on test cells. 这也是，就是如果说你的工作是跟透镜相关，或是你是做一些生医实验，或是做那种 liquid crystal cell， 就是液晶相关的研究的话，你也会常常看到这个东西。这个叫牛顿环。那牛顿环它会出现的原因，也是因为你的那个2片玻璃中间夹的你的那个简体的厚度， 就是不均匀所造成的。So this is Newton's ring, and it's very common if you work on two pieces of glasses and if you're putting something into the glass. And that is just telling you the thickness of your sample is not evenly distributed. So that is creating a Newton's ring. And here's a model for the Newton's ring. And if you have a perfect lens, then you can just use the same principle to derive the interference conditions, but just pay attention that the optical path here and the optical path here, it depends on the curvature of your lens, so you have to be very careful. But anyway, you can just usually we use Newton ring by looking at the colors and try to derive the thickness of the film. It's easier. So okay, but the principle is just the same. So you can see the Newton ring on a silicon wafer. So this is because the thickness of your wafer is not very evenly distributed, so you see the concentric rings. And this is the Newton ring, again on the silicon wafers, and you can see different textures. Right. Okay. So here are the knowledges for you to apply. 那么那关于光的，我们光的知识我们就先介绍到这里，然后我们先休息10分钟。So here are the knowledge about optics, and let's take 10 minutes of break. 然后我会把这个影片先结束哦，因为下1个小时开始我要讲近代物理了，然后我会开另外一个直播。对，这样子我比较好剪接，所以这个直播我会先关掉，然后有在上课的同学请大家记得跳出，然后去看另外一个影片。So now I'm closing this live stream because on the next hour I'm starting the modern physics, and I would like to start another live stream video because it's easier for me to do the editing. So let's just end this video, and then please just click on the other video for the modern physics.